At this year's Winter Olympic Games in Beijing, the presence of robots was unmissable. They served noodles and hamburgers, they disinfected surfaces, they measured temperature, they even presented awards. So, if anything, we see how technology is disrupting every industry in unthinkable manner, including travel and hospitality. Two sectors that were severely impacted during the pandemic, but are certainly on path to recovery. But in part, recovery and success which will also hinge on use of new technology pieces, such as automated processes in revenue management, newer and wider use of contactless technologies, as well as the ability to present personalized offers to customers and much more. Now, think about it. If these technology pieces are well integrated with human elements, it does have the power to positively disrupt the way the world works, travels, and enjoys. On that note, a very warm welcome to DisruptX, a virtual talk series conceptualized by Masonica. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about tech shifts in hospitality and travel industries. We will touch upon the opportunities, roadblocks, as well as an objective evaluation of tech pieces that worked and those that did not. As we see the use of technology accelerating across these industries, today we are joined by industry heavyweights who are going to be sharing their experiences, insights, and also ground realities. On that note, I'd like to welcome Mai Shalabi, COO, Quentra. Very warm welcome, Mai. Next,
Hello, Sana. How are you?
very well, thank you. I hope you're well too.
I'm good.
Next up is industry veteran Naim Madad, founder and chief executive, Gates Hospitality. Thank you so much for joining us, Naim.
Thanks for having me.
We're also joined by Michael Schaffner, VP Sales EMEA for Juto. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael.
Good being here. Hi, everybody.
Hi. Really excited to get into this conversation, so we're going to dive right in. I'm going to start with your thoughts on that one tech shift over the past 12 months that you found relevant and even inspiring. Michael, can we start with your thoughts, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Plasma, just one thing. I'm not seeing you. I'm not sure if that's for everybody else, but I only see a black screen. I see Mai and Naim, but we can't see you, just as an FYI. But we hear you very loud and clear, which is good.
Same for me.
Okay, good. So to your question, right, what is the biggest shift we've seen? It might not be a surprise, but maybe for some it's clearly automation, right? I think that is something what we saw coming over the years, but certainly over the past 12 months, that was accelerated, certainly through Corona. You know, one of the main reasons I think we all see globally is the lack of staff in our industry, where we took a heavy hit over the past 24 months where people were leaving our industry. And now we have a real challenge getting them back into our industry. And that's why if there's one thing I would have to say, it would be automation.
Thank you so much, Michael. Can we hear your thoughts, Mai?
Sure. For me, I think it's because of the more urgency on driving more direct bookings. It's especially for independent operators. People are more and more utilizing e-commerce tools, digital marketing, all of these things to drive more direct bookings. The other also thing is incorporation of more fintech trends into the hospitality industry, although it was a bit, late to catch up on that. These are my thoughts.
Couldn't agree with you more. I'd like to turn to you, Naim. Can we please hear your thoughts?
Sure. Look, I think for me, the biggest change that's been very evident, at least in the hospitality sector, is the acceleration to embrace technology. I think that's the biggest. It's been in the making for many years. I think a lot of adoptions taken place, but I think COVID, the pandemic generally, has really put a massive acceleration process on the entire acceptance of shift. Because again, as humans, we have an issue with change. When it comes to change, I think majority of the people are fairly slow on the uptake. But the biggest shift for me was that we have a lot of the operators have embraced and really starting to value technology and the benefits that it adds to the hospitality and tourism trade across the globe.
Absolutely. Is there an example that kind of stands out? Example from the F&B and hospitality industry?
Sure. Again, look, I think if I take the placing orders, I think a lot of placing orders, there are so many platforms today where the majority of orders are placed online directly without any human connections, unless there is a need, of course. But I think we're seeing a lot of these chapters being automated very rapidly. And once you have your market list, once you have your specs really entered in, once the platform is designed to suit a particular business, be it a hotel, resort, food and beverage unit, or a holistic wellness, I think placing orders have become the norm to go through technology platforms. And again, if you are very clear on the system, you know how the system works, and you know what you should be getting out of the system, I think the data that's being presented is very powerful. And I think this is the biggest learning moving forward, is how do we embrace this data and put it to good use across our businesses in order to get the benefit.
Sure. Thank you so much. And I move on with that to our first segment, where we want to touch upon how and understand how technology pieces are being used to increase operational efficiency. I'm going to start with you, Michael. If you can help us understand how technology is being used to not only optimize but also simplify operations in the hospitality sector.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So obviously, I can speak for the revenue side, for the yielding side, right? But funny enough, I was at a conference last week in Crete and had a conversation because I was taking photos of my receipts, right? And for me, it's the most normal thing to use a software, which it's called Expensify, to work on my expenses, right? So, but the person next to me, he saw the next big thing, right? So he was explaining to me that he's still kind of printing them out and putting them on paper, and it takes 2 hours every Friday to do those. So those are the little things when we talk about operation. I think we have plenty of those in our industry as well, in daily lives. But from our perspective, where we help hoteliers to make more money with an automated system when it comes to revenue management, that is huge. And we are in that shift, but there's still a long way to go. And essentially the idea that we have in mind is that the human being is doing the strategic work, and everything what's called tactical is being done by a platform, by an algorithm, right? And I think, as Naim said earlier, change management is probably our biggest obstacle. It's not a budget. It's not that we do have a problem with investing. It's a problem changing the way we work. And that is our biggest competitor. We always say it's not any other industry friend. Our biggest competitor is Excel, right? Excel spreadsheets, because everybody loves using those. Everybody knows a little bit. Some do know more, some do more less. But that is actually our biggest competitor. And that's going back to that change environment with human beings, no matter where they're based, no matter what language they are, no matter what kind of culture they live in. That is the biggest challenge. So for us, that's what we're trying to help hoteliers out there, making sure we move away from, tactical things, because we human beings are still being needed, right? We talk a lot about AI, but we are not frankly there, right? We're still operating on 70 CRS technology. So we still kind of have a certain way to get to an AI. So I think if we all kind of challenge ourselves to go into kind of first step where we move very strategical over tactical, I think that's a good start. And then we can help with that.
Absolutely. I'd like to move over to you, Mai. I'll have to say that I love the tagline of Quentra, and how you say that you're building a hospitality ecosystem for tomorrow. If you could please explain how you're doing that and also touch upon how, challenges related to different stages of maturity of different markets in the region affect that.
Sure. So yes, like you said, what we're trying to do is let's talk about three basic areas in for the hotel. It's the technology and people and processes. So from a technology standpoint, what we're trying to do, and especially in less mature and emerging markets, is to bring powerful technology, that enterprise level technology, if you say, and newer trends to the independent operator. But to do that, it's not only about technology, it's also about bringing different systems together. It's about making sure that the people are able to use this technology well. It's easier technology. It is easier user experience. It's much less steps to do everything. It's like Michael, that you said earlier, there's an obvious staff problem now after the pandemic, obviously. So we need to make sure that even people who do not come from hospitality background are able to use our systems and so on. And then also from a processes perspective, it's important to understand that not every, especially in less mature and emerging markets, you find a lot of hotels opening and service apartments with staff and management not necessarily coming from a hospitality background. So how to make sure that these people are able to use systems, are able to know the right processes, etc. From a challenges perspective, I would agree with Michael that there is still, and Naeem also, that there is still an issue with, there's obviously an obvious issue with change, and there is still an issue with migration to cloud technologies, for example. Some of it comes from the resistance to change idea, and some of it comes from some structural challenges that are still in the region. And obviously fear of migration from legacy systems and so on.
While it's very difficult to predict timelines as such, but from your experience, how long do you think this complete transition will take?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question. But I think that we're looking at 2 to 3 years maximum. I mean, we've seen, I see Naeem smiling. I don't know if you'd agree. Probably not.
It's not a matter of agreeing or not agreeing. We will never catch up. Technology is moving so rapidly that there's no end line, and there should be no end line. I think what we should be doing is how do we stay ahead of the game, and what does our business requirements stipulate, rather than let's stay up to date with technology. Not everything that's happening out in the workplace is necessary for my business or for particular industries. So I think we need to be very strong on deciding what does our business need, and then only make changes when our systems aren't being optimized to the next. That's why I was smiling. Sorry.
I agree with you completely. I actually understood Afsana's question about migration to cloud. Maybe this is what I was hoping. The migration to cloud takes 3 years, but no, I agree with you completely that we will not catch up with technology. Sorry, Afsana, go ahead. You were asking something.
Thank you so much, Mai. And I'll move on to you, Naeem. You are one of those people ambassadors that I know, such a strong people ambassador. And I'd like to ask you this question. How do you see technology pieces actually complementing those human elements and even enhancing it to a certain extent?
Yeah, look, you've hit the nail on the head. I think if we can accept the fact that technology should only be complementing human capital and emotional intelligence, then we are on a winning streak. But those who think that artificial intelligence, technology, IT will change the world and the human input, I don't think it's correct. I think we should be really looking at, again, as I stipulated earlier, is every business needs to analyze its needs. It needs to analyze the back of house systems, optimizations, technologies, automation. And last but not least, it's how do we complement the human to free them up in order to make sure they can focus on strategies, customer service, engagement, belonging, all of the stuff that we as humans long for and have been very clearly stipulated and reminded to all of us over the pandemic when we were only doing meetings over Zooms and the Teams and so on. I think people were ready to go back into connecting, shaking hands, exchanging business cards, and mixing and mingling, because that's how we as humans are built and designed. So for me, technology is a service enabler to the business, and it will never replace the human capital.
If I can add on here, I think one of the challenges we have, it's what I call the factor of fear, right? So the factor of fear in our industry is that now coming to a cloud technology point where we believe that human beings will actually be replaced with technology, right? But that is not true, right? We've seen it going back to the Ford days when the production line was invented, right? Human beings were not, replaced. They just found new jobs, right? Last week I read a quite interesting article about Amazon, right? Where people actually were also afraid that when the robots came in to do all the work in the warehouses, that they would be replaced. Actually, the result is that more people than ever before are actually working. They have a different job now, and their job is actually to serve the robots, which is quite interesting. Nobody ever thought about that, right? And that is a very similar thing in our industry, and especially when it comes to my side of revenue management. There is that factor of fear there, where people actually think that when you put on a revenue management system, that revenue managers will not exist anymore, and that is simply not true, right? What will happen is that the human beings will work differently. They will have different jobs. A revenue manager 5 years ago was used to push rates 5 hours a day, which is the most boring job out there, right? You don't want to do that, right? What you want to do is you want to think about, how can I work on my strategy? How can I change my segments? How can I get more direct bookings in, right? Those are the things which we want to enable with technology. So we always say it's a combination of human and machine, and maybe in 15, maybe in 20 years, a machine can also overtake strategy, right? But I think we all agree that will still take a little bit of time. When that comes, again, there's a factor of fear. We will not die out. We are very, very resistant species. We're human beings, right? So we will find a spot for us. But we always call it the factor of fear, which is quite interesting. And this is not just hospitality. This is globally, right? It's everywhere.
Absolutely. And you spoke my mind. There is that kind of fear that, okay, I mean, our jobs are going to be taken away at some point by robots. But that doesn't happen, because traditionally people crave human touch. People crave human interaction. And if the pandemic has taught us one thing, it's the importance of human interactions. So thank you for saying. So I'll stay with you, Michael. Due very interestingly, conducted a survey among revenue officials early this year. From your findings, do you see a clear pattern that says that the hospitality and travel industry are now sort of willing to consider more and more investments into technology?
Yes, it couldn't be clearer, actually. So we conducted a survey in March, and we had an overwhelming result, which said that 78% of hospitality professionals are expecting that tech investments are going to increase over the next 3 years. Right. So that is very clear. 80%. So there's a huge opportunity for players like us, for software companies, but for the entire industry. There's one critical piece to it, and that's going to be integrations. Right. So we spoke about the automation piece, which is obviously going to be driven and forced by that. However, tech investments will only make sense when we are able to build a better ecosystem, which means our tech stack within the industry has to be more integrated, and has to be integrated ideally in real time. And that is a challenge we're facing, probably since ever. But now, as we're moving over into a cloud technology age, there is an opportunity, but that means as well that everybody else has to help together to achieve this. But very clear answer, yes, people will invest more in the next years. We're already seeing it right now, but that will increase. But we have to watch out and make sure that integrations are intact and are in place.
Sure. Are there any other interesting findings from that study that you might want to share, one or two key pieces?
Yeah, so I can speak about our factor, which is about revenue management. So the 5 trends where the people were saying this is going to happen in the next 3 years. It was the integration, it was the automation, it was talking about total RevPAR, right? Moving away from rooms into total revenue management. the guests are expecting a digital guest journey and ancillary revenue like food and beverage, spa, golf, whatever we have out there is going to be very essential. And our industry has to move from a revenue perspective to a profit perspective, which we are already seeing. Like, when you see the business, how it came back, it was like a hockey stick, right? Nobody expected that MICE groups would come back that quickly. And so when you look at resorts, when you look at leisure, we shouldn't do the same mistake as we've done before, that we only look at room rates. There's a huge opportunity that you can make a lot of revenue, a lot of money, a lot of profits with your restaurant, with your golf course, with your tennis court, with your spa facilities. So that is the trend that we are seeing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'll turn to you, Naeem. If you could share with us some perspective from the F&B and hospitality business, do you see industry leaders actually interested to invest in technology to sort of make their existing systems more agile and also overcome certain challenges like food wastage?
Without a shadow of doubt, I think investment is being put into technology, not only in our sector, but across many other sectors. And if you take food securities, if you take farming, amongst many other businesses, these are primary investment targets today in the marketplace. And I think technology is certainly one of those. I only think will increase in the foreseeable future. We're seeing a massive interest. I think what's happening globally, if you take Tesla, for example, and their production, how they're looking after the automation yet sustainability. And I think this is exactly where the world is going. We're seeing a lot of integration on multiple fronts when it comes to investment in securities, technology, and so forth, meaning let's invest, but let's make sure that multiple silos, being traceability, sustainability, community development, are at the forefront of these investments. And I'm a great supporter of such approaches. I think also, just going back to what's been mentioned before, I think for me what's very important is the way we are looking at the business patterns now, post-pandemic. Not that the pandemic is over. We're still going through the pandemic. I think we're analyzing business revenues and revenue centers in a more holistic way. And TrevBar, as we're calling it today, or we have been calling it for a couple of years now, is really making sure that the spend in those resorts and hotels and business units, F&B units, is about multiple revenue centers. It's not about rooms, or not about profitability in rooms, profitability in the holistic wellness centers or food and beverage. It's making sure that we have a 360 approach and making sure that our audience, our guests, our customer base is being measured on the amount of revenues they spend in those particular units. Investment moving forward, I think we'll continue on focusing on what the world is really looking at. I think a couple of days ago, we're told we have 8 years before climate change becomes a major problem. So I think the focus should be all on that. Technology is a great source where data has been built for years. If we can dig deep and understand some of these researchers and what other solutions, I think the world will be in a better place.
Couldn't agree with you more. Thank you, Naeem. I'll turn to you, Mai, and ask you a slightly different question. Do you think there are roadblocks when it comes to tech investments by the hospitality industry?
What do I think the roadblocks are? I agree with Michael and Naeem about the fact that that integrations is an important part of things. That it's people who are used to buying 6 systems and trying to integrate them together, and then every new piece of technology that comes that raises to the top, they have to go to the legacy provider and ask for how to integrate and so on. So they're used to this mode of operations. So of course, hopefully with more migration to cloud, this becomes easier. The other is especially in less mature markets, I think it's that people do not know enough. There is an education aspect of things that people do not necessarily know what options are out there for them in terms of technology. So this is why we try to focus more on educational efforts, workshops, and things like that to to let people know that there are different possibilities. There is a different way of doing things. But I also think that among the changes that happened in the last year, people are becoming much more deliberate about their technology choices. They want to make sure that the ROI is right. They're not necessarily taking things for granted that this is the only way of doing things. So I do not see any roadblocks per se, apart from maybe some infrastructure challenges with internet, maybe in less mature markets. But hopefully this is on its way to change.
Sure.
I would like to add one roadblock, if I may. So to me, one huge roadblock is going to be the human being. And what I mean by that is that we need a change of profile in our industry, right? So when you go back to the regular setup, you had a GM, there's a front desk manager, there's a housekeeping manager, and so on, right? But when we look into the future, we need other profiles. We need people who know what data is, right? We need data crunch. We need data analysts in our industry. But not just that, we will have chief sustainable officers, right? We will have people looking after ESG scores. We will have way more focus on e-commerce, right? Maybe a GM reports into a CRO, a chief revenue officer, right? So to me, that's one roadblock that our expertise needs to change. And that also means that hotel schools need to change, right? The education has to change because we need to give them a different knowledge, a different experience level than what I experienced 20 years ago, right? Where you go through housekeeping. Maybe housekeeping is not relevant anymore because robots are going to do it in 5 years. And the housekeeping manager needs to have a technology degree because they have to maybe fix the robots when they're broken or when they broke an arm or something and they need to replace that. That sounds all like very futuristic, but I think we're in the middle of it and we have to start changing now in order to accommodate those requirements, those needs in the very short term and midterm future.
Sure. Thank you so much. So I see a common thread. There has to be more education and awareness. The tech pieces are already there, but we need more training, more awareness, and more education on its utility. And that will drive adoption. Well, on that note, I move on to objective evaluation of these tech pieces. And this time, I'd like to start with you, Naeem. As you see restaurant businesses picking up pace really well in our part of the world, if you could go back to, say, the last 18 months, if you could tell us what are those two technology pieces, one that worked very well for the industry and one that did not?
Sure. Look, again, this is my personal views and my personal take on what's worked for us in our business. For me, what's proven to be very successful is, as I said, the automation of reservations, of placing orders, all of the HR component as far as documentation works and so forth. What has miserably failed, and again, that's my personal humble opinion, is the QR codes of menu and causing a bigger gap between the service and the romance, if I may call it, of being in a venue and getting engaged and so forth. I think people, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put phones away rather than make them a necessary gadget in our venues and our places. I'm trying to revive the whole human connectivity rather than another obstacle. You can only access the menu through a QR code. Very basic examples, but I think everyone can relate to them. I dread to see people placing orders on a phone, particularly in certain level of restaurants. I still like to receive a hard copy of a menu, look at it, without having to be staring at my phone. That's my observations, at least.
Thank you so much for saying so, because I completely agree with you. I absolutely do not like scanning the menu on my phone. I would rather speak to a staff and get their views on things like, what's your favorite dish on this menu and why? And have that little conversation, because that's what we are craving for, I guess.
Absolutely.
I think it has to be optional, right? Because, I agree to that, but maybe the next generation doesn't agree to that, right? Because maybe they do not want to have that conversation, right? They're used to that kind of digital experience. So I think it always has to be optional, right? Either if I want to speak to a human being, then I should have the option. If I just want to have my digital app, so to say, I should have that as well. I found a very good experience twice. I was in Paris the last weeks more often. And 2 restaurants, I had a good experience with the menu. But to me, it was not just the menu. I agree, I like a menu. What I really liked was that I had the option to pay directly with the QR code, which was on my table, where I didn't have to wait. That's something can be a bit of a painful experience, especially when it's very busy in a restaurant. And to me, the payment process, is one of the processes, no matter if it's F&B or front desk checkout, which has the most efficiency opportunity out there, right? So I kind of like that I can pay my check with a scan, I have my PayPal connected with it or my credit card whatsoever. I can give a tip and off I go, right? So that was a very good experience I had. What I like to see more often, not just in F&B, but also in hotels.
And that's quite a
service. Sorry to interject. That's becoming a readily available service in this market. Certainly abroad, we are applying this service, and it's really facilitates the whole exit chapter as well for many diners. I think what's the other thing that we're finding very rewarding as well is in busy venues that are mid to lower scales. So maybe the first order is placed with your team members and so forth, but there is an option to place orders directly online as well, which we're finding very rewarding in busy bars and pubs where people don't want to queue up at a counter anymore. The first order, well and good, but then thereafter, they want to stay at their seat. They're afraid of losing their table and so forth. They stay at their seat and they place an order on their phone and it comes directly. So, look, I think honestly, technology is as good as we make it. As long as we create definition between the human and the automation, I think it's very important. And last but not least, let's make sure it's very simple, because I think the biggest obstacle, which we haven't spoken about, is fear of engaging. Because what if I press the wrong button? What if I pay too much?
Surely, I absolutely love the conversation that's happening today. Absolutely love it. I'll move on to my now. And while I understand that there is no crystal ball, but is there a technology piece that you're willing to bet on, which you think will redefine guest experiences in the hospitality and travel industries?
That's a big one. I'll take it down a notch and tell you that what we're trying to do is, for example, what has been working for us is that we try to use more tools that are analytical of about hotel users' experience. So, for example, like we were saying earlier, that the biggest challenge is how to make the interaction between humans and technology. And in this scenario, be it the guest or be it the hotel staff. But we are more focused on the hotel staff, and we're more focused on using the system to analyze how they interact with technology. How many clicks does it take a receptionist if he has a tour group of 100 people checking in at the same time? What's the exact process that they're going through, and how to make this much simpler and easier? So there is a lot that can be done, and this is especially the case in resorts and bigger resorts in MEA, that there's a lot that can be done to make this process much faster than people are used to right now. So things like intelligent room assignment, things like changing rooms easier, automating many of the housekeeping tasks. All of these are things that drastically shave hours of the day from the receptionist and from the cashiers and from the night auditors and income auditors and all of that. So and leave them to focus more on strategic things, like you said. So I think it's just that not a particular piece of technology. It's about how these all pieces of technology come together and adopted more when we will actually start seeing a lot more change in efficiency of how things are right now.
Thank you for summarizing this so beautifully. Michael, I have the same question for you. Can we hear your thoughts, please?
Sure. If I would have to pick one, I would go for payment. As we just spoke about, I think payment has the biggest upside, biggest uplift in our industry. Not just making it more convenient, as we discussed before, but also thinking more globally, right? Moving away from fiat currency, being more connected. And there's always this kind of metaverse or cryptocurrency out there, which I personally believe in. And I think that is going to be the biggest trend out there for our industry. However, there's two more things that I think become very important. No matter what we do, what will be more important is security piece to everything, right? So I just had this one experience last week again where my key didn't work and I was in front of my room, but the reception was far away and housekeeping person comes. And I asked him very nicely, can you let me in my room? And I wasn't asked anything. I was just led into this room, right? There is a combination with technology and security, which should be evolving in the future. And that's just one example of many. And the third trend that I kind of would bet on is that actually revenue management and CRM will merge together, will move closer together. We will move into like a one-to-one pricing, personal pricing, however you want to call it. That's going to be a trend I would definitely put money on.
Thank you so much. We've had such a fantastic session. I love the engagement, the energy, and the way you've been conversing with each other. Before we wrap up the episode, I would really like one parting thought from each one of you. Can we start with you, Michael?
Yes. One thought. When I was in university, I was taught it's all about location, location, location. I would like to change that phrase to it's all about integration, integration, integration.
Thank you so much. Moving over to you, Naeem.
For me, it's very clear. I think clarity of the difference between AI, artificial intelligence, and AI, emotional intelligence. I think they're two very distinctive corners, and I think they should collaborate and work in harmony, but none of them should be stronger than the other. At the end of the day, it is hospitality, travel, and leisure we're in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Mike, can we hear your thoughts, please?
I would go back to education and how and the interaction between human and technology.
Thank you so much. Well, it's almost time to wrap up the May episode of DisruptX, but not before we've spoken to our fourth speaker. We'll come back after this short break. Don't go too far. Welcome back, and we have our fourth speaker with us. Allow me to welcome Ralph Melis, co-founder and managing partner, Explore Tech. He comes with 15 years of hospitality and travel industry experience. Welcome to DisruptX. Thank you for joining us, Ralph. I'll dive straight into our conversation. And if we could start with your platform, Explore Tech, and how you're adding value to an industry that's looking for greater return on their current digital offerings. If you could please take us through how do you do that?
Sure. So Explore Tech is a new digital marketplace for the Middle East and Africa hospitality and travel industry. It's a place where hospitality and travel tech providers can boost their audience engagement and lead generation, and where the industry professionals have one go-to source to find and compare the tech solutions that they need. It's also a place where they can receive subject matter advice through some independent consultants. But our goal really is to drive that digital transformation across the industry by positioning our marketplace as the one go-to source, the marketplace for the future. Really giving the professionals of the industry a unified, user-friendly platform where we're enabling sort of their digital strategy development, right, for users and providers alike.
Thank you. We talk a lot about the connected consumer and how consumers always would like to connect with their favorite brands, be that hotels or restaurants. And in this age of digital and remote self service, how are platforms and technology pieces enabling businesses to sort of build that meaningful connection with consumers?
I see a lot of software providers mainly, right, who are enabling that journey for guests, especially in the hospitality industry. Sometimes the challenge with hotel operators still is, what legacy tech stack they have, right, which they're working on, and if the integrations are possible in any way. So it's definitely a requirement from the guests these days that they want to, for example, check in themselves prior to arrival or provide all of their information in terms of ID, etc., before check-in. And as much as hotels sometimes want to enable this, some of them sometimes are maybe stuck with a legacy system which maybe doesn't have the right integrations for that. So they'd have to change their tech stack really to be able to do that, or have providers of those solutions integrate to that piece of technology which they have from a legacy perspective.
Transition happening already?
It is slowly but surely. I think the benefit is that there's obviously over the past few years, this has become more important in terms of self-service for guests and travelers. So there are a lot of tech sort of providers of the fundamentals for hotels who are either enabling this themselves from their side. So, for example, the property management systems of hotels who are enabling their own remote check-in functionality. And we see that as time passes, that the number of integration possibilities for other providers also starts to increase. So it's definitely moving, and some solution providers are better than others, obviously, but it's all about the awareness, right? For the professionals and the decision makers on the hospitality side, for them to really compare solution providers to each other is still challenging for them to do that themselves and manually. And that's kind of where our platform also comes in, so that they can really feature by feature, with subject matter expertise behind it, prepare these solution providers properly, and then easily reach the representatives from these vendors as well. Because it's one thing about finding something, but then getting in touch with the right person to communicate with that vendor is the next challenge for them sometimes.
Absolutely. And my last question to you will be, when you look back at the past 12 to 18 months, what is that big tech shift within the hospitality and travel industry that you found most relevant or even inspiring?
I think the hospitality industry is starting to look more holistically at their tech stack, right? And first of all, how systems communicate to each other. And obviously, guest data has become very important. I think a lot of hotel companies and hotel businesses, small independents, maybe smaller chains, larger chains even, were in a way left out to dry a little bit over the last 2 years, because maybe they didn't own the guest data as much and were not able to use it as much to reach them again when they needed that business to come back. So that makes you very reliant on third parties, right, to get that business. But the capturing of information from guests and what their preferences are, and being able to offer that customized journey to guests is becoming more and more important. So how guest apps communicate with the PMS to record their preferences, and then that gets transferred into a CRM, which then gets used to do pre and post communication with guests. That whole circle is now more and more important for hotels. And I think more hotels are starting to wake up for that.
Sure. Thank you so much once again for joining us on the show, Ralph.
You're most welcome. Pleasure to be here.
On that note, we wrap up yet another wonderful episode of DisruptX and also our Revolution series. I can't thank our speakers enough for joining us for the Revolution series. I would also like to thank our audience for watching us, supporting us, and Team DisruptX for putting the series together. Before signing off, I would also like to announce the start of our Impact series in July, a series that will focus on how technology can be leveraged for the good of people, communities, society, and eventually the world. So do look out for our Impact series and keep watching and supporting DisruptX. Thank you so much.